but only 4 species of snakes in Texas have a medically significant venom. Copperhead, the cottonmouth, the rattlesnake, and the coral snake. And fun fact with the coral snake, it is actually our only elapid, which is the same family that the cobras fall under. These guys don't hood up, though. They're a lot shyer. So the first one we'll talk about is the copperhead. Besides the cute freckles all over the face, these guys have a very distinct facial feature. All of our pit vipers are called pit vipers because of that pit. I will also show you guys some of the broken myths and legends around snakes throughout this. So you're going to look at the slit pupil here. That doesn't always tell you if it's venomous or not. This guy right here, it is a hemotoxin. So that means it's going to kind of attack your blood. It'll cause some pain, some swelling, in some cases tissue damage, but you're not going to die from it. They do have a live birth. They don't lay eggs. And when we get back onto camera, I actually have a small neonate copperhead you guys will be able to see. The one in the image here is actually a baby. It is probably only a few weeks old. You could tell the size with that quarter there, and you can actually see the green caudal lure that I had the arrow pointing to. When they're little, they just kind of sit there and wiggle that tail like a worm. Since they're too small to actually go out and hunt, they'll use that as a way of ambushing predators. Another telltale thing, and I do this with all the kids, for the eastern copperhead only this works, is this right here. Looks like a little Hershey kiss. The kids get it every time. Some of the adults, maybe not so much. I guess we lost our imagination a bit sometimes. So its cousin, the cottonmouth. These guys are actually commonly, the cottonmouth and the copperhead are considered North American moccasins, since they are in that same grouping of the Agkistrodon. But they have both completely different markings. And one of my favorite things with the cottonmouth, to tell the cottonmouth when you see it, is that slash right through the eye, that dark band that you can see where the arrow is pointing. These guys here have, with the kids, I tell them bad rock star makeup. So it looks like somebody just put on some really bad wings. As babies, as juveniles, you'll see the pattern on the left is a lot more vibrant. It's going to help them with that ambushing predators, hiding. They also have the green caudal lure that the copperhead has. As they get older, they will darken. You can still see that band across the eye in both of them. Not so much this guy with the front of his face. All cottonmouth have kind of like that chin up, what's up bro kind of look to them when they're trying to be defensive. They're going to show you that chin up, and if that doesn't work, they're going to open that mouth and show you the inside of the mouth to let you know, like, hey, this is my only form of defense. I'm going to use it if I have to. So we covered copperhead and cottonmouth. We've got rattlesnakes here. The one in the image on the left is actually a timber rattlesnake. We'll cover that one in a moment. So our first rattlesnake, and this one is super elusive. There's only been one found in Texas in the last few years that I know of, and the person has kept it as an educational ambassador. They are very small, full size, 15 to 20 inches, and they have a cytotoxin. So it's going to be a little more potent, a little bit more damage with this one. However, this one here in the video that I'm playing right now is actually a young baby. You can see the way it's using its tail. It's going to be kind of a distraction. And these guys are so tiny that their rattle is only kind of a button. You might not even hear them at all. It's not going to be like our larger species, like the Western Diamondback or the timber, where you're going to hear them when they start buzzing. These guys' only defense, besides running away and pooping on you, is biting. They don't want to waste that venom, though. All right, the Western Diamondback rattlesnake. I said hemotoxins in a question mark because there is some debate between scientists, biologists, tox doctors that talk about how it, although it may attack the blood, there are some other proteins in there that can cause other issues. So it may not be full on hemotoxin, but that would be a whole nother talk to go into. Again, you're not likely to die from a bite from one of these guys. We do have anti-venom, and I'll go over bite protocols at the end to let you guys know where to go should you be bitten. These guys are very easy to distinguish from all the other ones because they have not only the diamond pattern on the back, but you can also see that banding around the tail. That's common with our Western Diamondback. They do get pretty big as well. I actually have a shed from a full-grown female out of a breeding pair that a friend owns, and it is over 5 feet with the shed from head to toe, or head to tail, I guess. One of my personal favorite, they have recently been removed from the state protections in Texas Parks and Wildlife. So although it is illegal to buy and sell, you can own one of these now, and you can have bits and pieces without getting any kind of repercussions. Although I personally don't agree with it, because we do still have a lot of habitat destruction and loss, it is still a snake that I feel personally needs protections. The really unique thing with these guys, besides their pattern, you're going to find these all the way up in Pennsylvania, all the way down in Texas, the color variations, but their toxins, or the venom, is going to be what is different between population and population. So population that you might find in Huntsville State Park, their venom could have more of a hemotoxin to it, or a population you'll find in another area of Texas could have something completely different. These have one of the most widely varied venom toxicities in existence. So the only other neurotoxin that we usually have to worry about would be the coral snake. These guys have a pretty potent venom with a pretty potent neurotoxin. Again, with most of the rest of these snakes, they are very seldom, they're never aggressive, always defensive, and it's rare to get a bite from one of these guys unless you just happen upon it and don't see it, or you're asking someone to hold your drink before going to it.
Hey, Riki, can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
We have a question from Bill Bass, and this is about the cottonmouths.
Okay.
And the question is, do other snakes in the area that are mistaken for cottonmouths have a dark band across their eye, or is this unique to cottonmouths?
It's pretty unique to the cottonmouths. I actually do have some images I could pull up towards the end of the slideshow that'll show you the differences between their mimics, or what we would perceive as a mimic, and the cottonmouth itself. The other thing that I'll show you later on in the slideshow will actually be where the lines separate on the scales on the cottonmouth. A lot of our other snakes will actually have vertical bars that fit those lines there that the cottonmouth doesn't have. So it's a really good way to tell the difference.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. All right, and let me know if I am going too fast. So our last venomous snake that we're going to talk about is the coral snake. These guys here have a potent neurotoxin. The big difference with a bite from one of these guys, if you're envenomated, versus a bite from any of our pit vipers, is that you may not have pain present at the bite site. You may not have swelling. You may not have any issues for up to 12 hours. It's during that time period between the bite and when you do start showing symptoms is where the venom's kind of doing its thing, and you might end up having issues with shortness of breath, twitching, muscle spasms, stuff like that. But to get a bite from one of these guys, you really have to be doing something silly you shouldn't be doing with the snake, or you weren't paying attention where you're grabbing. They are front fanged. They're not like our pit vipers. They're not hinged fangs where they kind of reach out. They can individually move the fangs. These guys have rigid front fangs, so they don't move. They're just there, extra pointy, and deliver the venom. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you, you see on here it says, forget that rhyme. I want you to remember just that big bold font, forget that rhyme. By the time you guys say the rhyme, the snake is gone, or you said it wrong and you just got bit by what you thought was a milk snake. The image that should be showing right now shows you, besides the usual meme of Batman slapping Robin for being silly, it shows you a lot of our aberrant patterns, meaning that they go against what their normal patterns are supposed to be. All of these, except for, I think 2 of them, were found in Texas. So these are all Texas coral snakes. The one at the top right was actually bred for that coloration. The rest of them were all found wild. So it's kind of another reason not to follow a lot of the other telltale myths and legends with snakes about eye shape, head shape, and everything, because Mother Nature hates to follow her own rules. It's like mom telling you you can't have that soda, but she's drinking one right in front of you. All right, so the next part on this, the mimics. I have one picture of a cottonmouth on here in the bottom left. The other 2 are plain belly water snakes. They are completely harmless, although they will give you a good bite. They will smear their poop all in that bite, but that is the worst you're going to have from one of these guys. They are also found in the water. They swim above the water. They swim below the water. They will open their mouth and show their teeth, but there are no fangs and there's no venom. And it's all the same kind of things that a cottonmouth will do. The big thing that you can remember with these guys is if you can see the vertical bars on the mouth. That's something I was talking about earlier when Bill had asked the question about the cottonmouth. And you see neither one of these guys have that band across the eye. So a lot of our snakes will have these mimics. This is another water snake here. This is actually a diamondback water snake on the left with the cottonmouth on the right. You can see the band on the cottonmouth. With the water snake, you can see those vertical bars. You're also going to want to look at eye placement. So on the cottonmouth, if you see that scale right there, it's kind of like the visor on your hat for that cottonmouth. So he's not going to see right above them very well, but he's going to see from the sides and in front of it. These water snakes, because they spend most of their time in that water, kind of like how an alligator's eyes are top set on the head, these water snakes are the same way. So they're going to be able to poke their nose up, get some air, see around, and go back under if they need to. Looking at a copperhead or a cottonmouth directly above, you're not going to see the eyes. Looking at these guys directly above, you're going to see those big bulgy eyes right on top. So one of our other common mimics, this is a Louisiana milk snake with a Texas coral snake. Again, the rhyme fits with these ones because neither one of these are aberrant patterns, but that rhyme is also only meant for North American coral snakes. If we pulled up something from South America or from anywhere else in the world, you would have just been envenomated. Although you can tell side to side, these guys are completely different. Fear makes you do a lot of silly things, and you're going to think you've seen a coral snake on this left because all you're seeing is the bright red and the stripes, the banded pattern, and panic. I'm hoping when this is done, they repost it. You guys will be able to go back to this later to double check. That is the end of the slideshow. If I went too quickly, please ask lots of questions. I have extra pictures to post up for you guys, and I can go back through the slideshow if you need me to.
Riki, I do have another question here.
Okay.
Are milk snakes usually red, black, and white?
This specific species, yes. There is an eastern milk snake that gives a pattern similar to the prairie king or a young rat snake. So unless you really know what you're looking at, you might have thought you ran up on a juvenile one of those. They're kind of browns and tans. I know there are a couple other species of milk snake, and then you've got the pet trade where you're going to find everything. But commonly around here is that pattern.
And then another question: if we are not supposed to pay attention to the rhyme on coral snakes, is there a way to tell them reliably from a non-venomous snake?
If they are not aberrant patterned, the big thing that I've always noticed on the Texas coral, at least, is it kind of this black patterning, not even patterning. It looks like someone spilled their ink inside of this guy here on the red. See if I can get to the other picture of the coral. And same thing in here, you get the black splotches within the red. Whereas with the milk snake, it's all really solid colors. Okay. So you don't have any black within that red. It's very solid colors. There's no differentiation between it. The other thing with the corals is they always have this yellow band directly behind the eye unless they're aberrant pattern.
Good deal. And I'm just going to start going down the line on these questions, okay?
Okay.
Do you want to keep sharing your screen? That's fine with me because I think people are going to want more pictures.
Yeah, I can keep sharing because I have a little folder pulled up with other pictures in it too.
Good deal. Okay. Our next question: what is the most common type of snake that we might see in our backyards?
So right now, the ones that you're going to see in your backyard, especially with the weather coming through, is we have the DKs. It is a very small brown snake, eats soft-bodied invertebrates, and I'm not sure if I have a picture of that one. So I'll have to Google that up later that we can pull aside in a bit. We just also have
if you want to just describe it a little bit, it almost looks like a, like a.
So the yeah, the DKs, you're only the max size I've ever found with one is 12 inches, and that's pretty big. They're tannish brown color with a very slight pattern down the dorsal side of the snake or the back. We also have the rough earth snake that's a little smaller, solid brown, and there's not a whole lot to them. There's no pattern to them. It's just a sleek, solid brown snake. If you see them, they've come up chasing some food because it's not very often that they're out of their hiding. St. Augustine grass that we have in a lot of neighborhoods is perfect for them. Besides those two, the other common calls that I get is the Western rat snake, which in this image here, it's not full grown. They can get a little bigger than that. This is pulled out of someone's yard a couple of years ago. They also give the same defensive posture. You'll actually see Peanuts, the one on the right. He is also a rat snake, and then a native rat snake. They both give the open mouth gesture that a cottonmouth does. So you can see with the coloring and the open mouth, they get mistaken for the cottonmouth a lot. And then I get a lot of copperheads. Copperheads is one of the more common relocations that I do for the venomous relocations.
And so to answer up on that, we had a follow-up question. Out of the snakes that Riki just named, only the copperhead is venomous. So rat snakes aren't venomous, decays are not venomous.
Correct.
Okay, and then our next question is from Carol Oler. How much do juveniles differ from adults? So you talked a little bit about that.
That depends on the snake completely. You saw with the picture of the copperhead baby, this guy here, it's the same one I showed in the slideshow, just a different angle. You see the caudal lure and the size of the quarter. These guys here, nothing else changes about them besides their size and losing that caudal lure. The babies and the adults look exactly the same. With the cottonmouth, it was just that pattern differentiation where the pattern starts out really light. Let me get back to the slideshow. And then it slowly dulls as they get older. Some of them will hold the pattern, but usually it's this kind of consistency with patterns. Start out really light, real vibrant, get a little darker. The rat snake will be a little lighter in color. The pattern's going to be a lot more apparent. And then you're going to have them as they get older, they get to that same saddle pattern on the back, white belly. A lot of our snakes usually stay about the same, usually.
Okay, and then our next question from Michael Nelson. What action should you take if you accidentally come across a snake and you aren't sure if it's venomous?
So depends on how you've come across it. If you're just out hiking and you happen to step over it, move really slowly away from it. If you could take a picture, fantastic, safely do so. If you can't, just remember what it was, take a good mental snapshot of it, and consider yourself lucky if it was venomous or not. If you're trying to identify it, you don't want to look at head shape and everything. You really just got to pick up your book and learn your patterns. With a lot of our snakes, they differentiate a lot between species, which would be the obvious thing. If you have tools with you, when I go out hiking, I always have a snake hook. I can scoot it off the trail. If you have a stick nearby that you can safely do so with, you can scoot it off the trail so the next person passing doesn't get to it. Again, it just depends on your interaction with it, how you've come across it.
I noticed that you didn't say killing it.
Absolutely not, unless you plan on eating it. I have no problem with feeding yourself, but most people don't.
I think that's about right. Okay, our next question from Sally Hilliard. Is there a shortage of anti-venom? I have heard that doctors are reluctant to use anti-venom unless someone is really sick from a bite.
There is no shortage. Doctors who are reluctant don't know how to do their job, and that's not just me being a turd. When Spencer Green, he was our toxicologist at Ben Taub, one of the biggest things that he teaches during the Houston Venom Conference every year is that there is no shortage on any anti-venom. I've got friends that own exotics that we shouldn't have anti-venom for, and the zoo has access to it. So if you get bitten by something, you know for a fact that it is venomous, and you go to a hospital, they don't give you anti-venom, go to another hospital or ask for a different doctor. The only thing to treat venom is anti-venom.
So I've heard, Riki, very specifically that they don't make the coral snake anti-venom anymore. And so we do have a finite supply of that. Is that also a myth?
To an extent, no. So we do have access to coral snake venom. What they're doing essentially is they take a small bit of the batch every year and they test it to make sure that it is still functional and potent, like how every medication has an expiration date. It's been past its expiration date, but it is still usable. They test it every year. The issue with coral snake anti-venom is it's so expensive to make and so few people get bitten that they just don't make it anymore. If we get to a point where we need to start making it, I'm sure they're going to ramp up production, but by the time we need that, it shouldn't be an issue.
Right. And just to provide clarification to another question, yes, all the coral snakes that that Riki showed were found in the wild in Texas, except for that one that she said was bred very specifically for that coloration. Am I correct, Riki?
Yes. So the one at the top was bred by Sladen. The friend of Samuel Anthony Rhodes and the Treasure Coast Wildlife Center, those two were not from Texas, but they are still the same species. Since we do share a lot of different snakes in different areas, the rest of these were all found within Texas.
Got it. Our next question comes from Paul Herman, who asks, do you have a picture of a rat snake? And why do I always worry that I am seeing a copperhead when I see one?
It's a good question. When they are younger, I do have the rat snake, the one that I pulled up earlier. I have this one here as well as with Peanut. He is a rat snake, so it kind of gives you an idea of the genetic abnormalities that can happen with breeding. See if I have another one in here. I don't have another one in this list of images, but if your rat snake looks anything different than this, chances are you don't have a rat snake unless it's aberrant. Every time you come up on anything dark and you're scared.
If you're showing a rat snake right now, we are not seeing it. We're just seeing your slideshow.
Ooh, okay. Let's close that real quick. All right, let me get back to screen sharing. Sorry about that, guys. All right, what do you see now?
I see a very grumpy rat snake.
All right, so that's your rat snake. Chances are when you're seeing something dark and slithery in your yard, regardless of the time of day, even I hesitate on occasion when I'm getting ready to grab a hold of something during relocation. Your mind's going to want you to double check. Your biggest bet or your best bet usually is if you see anything that's over 3 feet, it's not as likely to be a cottonmouth. They don't get super huge here in Texas. You see some of the Florida species will get pretty decent size if they're not killed first, but our rat snakes, you're not going to find a cottonmouth the size of these rat snakes.
Thank you. Joe wants to know if it's true that copperheads love to feast on cicadas when they emerge from the ground.
Absolutely. I don't know why we don't. It's a huge protein pack. It's like the equivalent of the snake's Lunchable. Quick and easy. If they get them when they're fresh, they're still soft, and it's an easy swallow, and it's a perfect food for them.
Great. Bill Bass wants to know if dogs and cats react the same to copperhead and cottonmouth snake bites as humans. What should you do if your pet gets bitten?
So I get this question a lot on the relocation page. I don't have a personal vet that I know that you could go to. I know a lot of vets do anti-venom treatment. Whatever you do, Benadryl doesn't work. Don't use it. As far as the reaction similarities, a lot of it's body size. So if you have a big Rottweiler that gets bitten, they may just have some issue with some swelling. Whereas if you have a cat that gets bitten, it may not make it because it is a smaller animal. It also depends on whether it was a dry bite or a wet bite. Not all venomous snakes will actually hit you with the venom because it costs them a lot of energy to make it. So as for treatment and whatnot, your best bet is to contact a couple of vets in the area and see who you have that will actually do treatment for that.
Great. And then a follow-up, is it true that possums are immune to copperhead venom and that they like to eat them?
I think their body metabolizes it differently. I have to actually look that up because I've had a couple of people ask and I have not gotten around to Googling it. But I know that they will eat pretty much anything they can get their mouths on. They're a good cleanup crew, so that could be possible.
Good. Well, we've given you homework.
Yep.
Aaron wants to know what snake is behind you.
In the big tall thing, let me go back to my screen share. Here we go. Can you see my camera now?
Yes.
All right, so that is Peanut, the one that was in the white snake that was in that image. He is actually my personal educational ambassador, and right now he is wanting a mate, so he's a little ornery. But he's one of my only ones that's ever actually bitten me as well. So you see what he's doing right now with the belly up? If he were a normal rat snake, that white belly would kind of be startling to a would-be predator. And he's kind of getting in that S-curve to let me know that, okay, keep messing with me, I'm going to strike at you. So he doesn't want me to mess with him right now, but normally he's not so bitey once I get him out.
Thank you. And Robert Bradshaw wants to know, he's been told that we have no rattlesnakes in the Spring Trails area. Would you consider that true?
So I was living in Spring Trails for about 5 years. And in that time, I've gone all over Spring Creek and everywhere. I have not found any. I have not had relocations for them. I have not had any of my volunteers or those that I've worked with that have found them. It's not saying that it can't be true, but your likelihood of finding one is slim to none.
I would agree with that. Awesome. Does anybody else have any other questions that they'd like to put into the chat? Or at this point, you can unmute yourself and ask them like a real person. Up to you.
This is Carol. I'm just wondering, there's so many people who still say the only good snake is a dead snake. And in my local park, I think sometimes the mud district still sends somebody in to what they call relocate the snake, but I think first they kill them before they relocate them. Do you have any other suggestions on how to better educate people that the snakes are okay? I mean, and pretty much the only snakes I ever see in the detention ponds are the Diamondback water snakes or the broad-banded water snake.
Yeah, so I had actually been asked to be part of a crew that was supposed to go in and remove snakes from an area and relocate them. The problem with that is you remove one, another one's going to come in behind it if it's a good place for them to live. It's no different than your neighbor having a koi pond and wondering why the koi keep getting eaten by herons or snakes or the neighborhood cat. There is a company, which I will give that company to Suzanne later for everybody to use if they need to avoid. It's one of the companies that those people actually use in that neighborhood specifically for removing snakes. They use it under the guise of humane, but they end up killing them. The only way to educate people is giving the education, like what I've been doing for the past almost 5 years. But that phrase of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I have people that consider me infamous because they can't stand what I'm saying, because they don't want to think about the fact that they've been doing this for so many years, or they aren't willing to open their eyes and pick up a book. You know, they're stuck in my grandpa told me this, my mom told me this, it can't be wrong. So keep putting that information out there. You don't have to get in their face about it or anything, but that's about the only thing we can do. And those who are willing to take that information and learn from it, those are the ones that'll come to us when they need it. Those who won't, you can't help someone who won't help themselves.
Thanks. And then lastly, I do have a request. If you have any more pictures of Nerodia, of water snakes, I think some folks are curious to know maybe the difference between a diamondback versus a broad-banded versus a plain-bellied. I don't know if you have those images easily available right now.
I can here in 1 minute. Once I get them up, I'll do the screen share.
Well, while Riki is doing that, I just want to mention that Riki has also donated her time to us annually for our gala, which will be happening again this year, digital or otherwise. It will be happening. So thank you, Riki, for doing that, and look forward to having you again this year.
Thank you.
Hey, Suzanne, this is Bill. I have a question. Is it, a lot on the topic of educating people, you hear a lot of people say things like, in their yards, they think that snakes are there permanently in a particular location. And is there any truth to the fact that if a snake finds a certain aspect of your yard, that it will always stay there, or are they more transient? And if you happen to see snakes there, it's just not the same one. It's probably just a good location for any snake that comes along.
So that's a good question. Can you guys see this image here?
I can see your image library. I can't see a specific image.
All right.
Probably just need to switch over to different screen.
Yeah. New share. All right. I'm still learning some of the Zoom stuff.
Adorable.
Okay. So the question that was just asked about snakes in your yard, if you're seeing one specific species over and over and over again, chances are it's found a really good food source, water source, or shelter. If you have a wooden deck on your backyard and things can get underneath of it, you're going to have something living under there. The snake's not going to be there unless you've got one of those three items, the food, water, and shelter. If you have a pond, you're going to have snakes. If you've got a deck with covering, you're going to have a home for rats or other small things that snakes will eat. The snakes will come for that. If you don't want them in your yard, you just got to make sure that you keep your grass short, you keep your shrubs 4 inches or higher off the ground. Don't leave anything laying in your yard. If you have a wood pile, it's going to attract rats, it's going to attract snakes. There is no chemical that actually works for deterring them. All the stuff that they sell in the stores is scam, and I don't know how they're able to get away with it. And mothballs are actually an EPA violation to put out, nor do they work. So for your snakes in your yard, there's not a whole lot you can do. If they're there, that means there's a food source. If you're seeing the same species, it could be the same one you were seeing over and over again. If you're seeing multiple species, they're coming in and out for food.
I think you're touching on something important there, Riki, which is if you don't want to have snakes in your yard, you also won't have a lot of other species that you might want in your yard, because snakes are a really important part of a balanced ecosystem. So you keep out the snakes, you keep out the food web.
Absolutely. One of the big things that I started teaching when I lived in Spring Trails is that neighborhood was supposed to be that and Bender's Landing Estates. They were meant to bring you closer to nature, but you cannot pick and choose what parts of nature you're close to. It's all or none.
Wonderful. So what do we have in front of us on the screen?
So this first one I pulled up is actually a juvenile broadband water snake. They're one of the water snakes that their pattern doesn't change as they get older. The only thing that changes is they get bigger and they might get more vibrant or more dull, but they'll still have that same pattern. It's almost like little flame bursts down the back. These guys are a common water snake you'll find in the area. They'll get 2-3 feet. 3 feet's pushing it, probably closer to 2. And let's see if I can pull up another one. All right, I'm going to stop sharing real quick so I can pull up the other one. Sorry, guys.
No problem. While you're pulling up the other one, the Diamondback water snake, that's our big boy, right? That's the one that gets the largest out of all the species of water snakes, even larger than the Cottonmouth.
Oh, absolutely. And they eat everything.
Yeah.
They're one of the few water snakes that will actually openly dine on rodents, which our other water snakes are not as keen to. They're going to prefer frogs, toads, fish.
Also, if you've seen a viral video of an old man feeding a snake on his dock, that one goes around every couple years. That is a Diamondback water snake that guy is coming to the dock and feeding. I'm not saying you need to be that in touch with your local snake species, but it's a pretty cute video.
It is. I wish I could feed snakes like that. Oh, here we go. I have a juvenile Diamondback water snake that I can share with you guys. So this image here was actually one that was caught in the middle of the street in Spring Trails when I used to live in Pecan Crossing. This is a very small baby. This is actually a woman's hands, so you get an idea of size. But these guys will hit 4 feet, give or take. And it's also one of my worst non-venomous bites, catching a gravid female Diamondback water snake that was pushing that 4-foot range. They'll let you know when they don't want to be messed with. But they do have a really neat
Diamondback water snake.
Yes. I have the same image of that snake in, let's see, new share. There we go. So you can see the belly pattern on the same snake. And then you guys saw the plain belly earlier, which is usually a solid black with a bright yellow belly. They were formerly known as a yellow belly water snake, and a cousin was the blotched water snake, but they decided to change all that taxonomy when I first started learning and combine them all into one snake, which is the plain belly.
And people want to know what it felt like when you got bit.
So by the big one, it wasn't fun. It's a bad pinch. If anybody in the group has a tattoo, when they're gnawing, it's kind of like they're doing the fill needle, and it's not fun. But I mean, it's nothing compared to what it would have been if it were venomous. I actually have a picture of a snake bite that I will also share.
Yeah, I would agree, just to branch off of that, I sort of feel like if you've ever been scratched by a cat, like if you have just a cat that's enjoying scratching you, I would say you've experienced a snake bite for most species.
The worst of the worst, at least.
Yeah, it's probably worse than a snake bite. Almost every time I've been bitten, I've been hit by a vine on the same day that felt worse.
Yep. So the image I'm sharing right now is a Western rat snake. This was during a children's birthday party. I have one of my volunteers with me, and pulling him out of the tub, he was very ornery because he was a relocation. The snake is completely wild. We picked him up a day or two before, and I'll keep him for a day or two if I know I've got a class coming up, an in-person class anyway. And this guy here actually showed the kids a really good way of, hey, he's not venomous. She's not dying. The snake's okay. Nobody was hurt. It's just a little blood. But you could tell he wasn't happy with being handled.
Did you get invited back to that birthday party?
I have a lot of parents that have asked me back for the children that were visiting the party. And I've actually made a couple of friends through those groups as well.
Love it. And then this will probably be our last question, and we'll let you get back. Are you surprised that we have not had any Burmese python issues in Houston like they have in Florida?
I'm not surprised at all, just because our temperatures get too cold during the winter, at least in this area, that they just wouldn't make it. I've actually had somebody contact me about a decent sized red-tailed boa coming out of the Mercer Arboretum last year, that when they found it, it was already on its way out. It was dying because it was survived the winter, but it survived the winter with wounds that were already infected. Bones were showing. It was awful. It had to be euthanized, but they just don't make it in our winter, which is unheard of in Texas because the winter is usually nothing for us. So
Right, right. Well, thank you so much, Riki. That was so informative. I hope that if people think of questions later, please feel free to send me an email. I can, I know Riki, you know, like I can get in touch with her. And so we'd be happy to answer your questions. This is our first in our series of Zoom presentations that we'll be offering while we're all quarantined. Our next one may be on frog calls. Not sure. I might be doing that one if I can share audio reliably. But thank you guys so much for joining us. And I hope you have a terrific rest of your day. And a big thank you to Riki. I'm giving you a big virtual round of applause.
thank you guys.
Thank you. All right. See you guys later.
Bye-bye.